meditation does is um, it um, it provides, it gives us the broader framing for what is it that we're doing. You know, um, one could meditate, right? Whatever that word means. One could meditate. One could learn how to meditate to cultivate the mind, the heart, for all kinds of reasons. Most of the reasons are good reasons, you know, uh, but not necessarily the reason the Buddha taught it. Um, so, good reasons can fall outside of what the Buddha talked about for sure. We don't need to be that narrow. Uh, but nonetheless, Buddha taught mhm, Buddhist meditation. Buddha taught us how to cultivate the mind, how to train the heart for a specific reason. And, and so these opening recitations, one of the functions, at least you can think of them, that one of the functions of this is to properly situate what is it that we're doing here, or why, right? So let us begin with the opening recitation. All other sentient beings, limitless as the sky, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, who create obstacles on my path of liberation and all knowingness, may they experience happiness separated from suffering. I will quickly establish them in the state of the most perfect precious Bodhi, all mother sentient beings, limitless as the sky, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create on my path of liberation and all knowingness. May they experience happiness and be separated from suffering. I will quickly establish them in the state of the most perfect and precious Thee, all mother sentient beings, limitless as the sky, those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path of liberation and all knowingness, may they experience happiness and be separated from suffering. I will quickly establish them in the state of the most perfect and precious Bodhi. Thus, until I achieve Buddha, in virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. Until death, I engage in virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. From now until this time tomorrow, I engage in virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. In the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, most excellent, I take refuge until Bodhi is reached by the merit of generosity and other perfections. Attain Buddhahood for the sake of all wandering beings in the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, most excellent. I take refuge until Bodhi is reached by the merit of generosity Sati and other perfections may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, most excellent, I take refuge until Bodhi is reached by the merit of generosity and other perfections. May I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all wandering beings. May all mother sentient beings, limitless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. In equanimity, free from the bias of attachment and aversion. May all mother sentient beings, as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from the bias of attachment and aversion. May all mother sentient beings, limitless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from the bias of attachment and aversion. You protector who possesses great kindness, all-knowing teacher, perfect one, basis of oceans of merit and qualities. To you, the Tathagata, purity, the cause of freedom from attachments, virtue, from the lower realms. This alone is the sublime ultimate reality. Homage to the Dharma that pacifies, having been liberated. The path of liberation, devoted to the moral precepts, you are a field of perfect qualities. Homage to the sublime Sangha, whatever slight virtue that may have been gathered through prostrating, offering, confessing, rejoicing, requesting, and beseeching, dedicate to complete Bodhi. We will take just a few moments to let both body and mind settle. So think of this, at least at this point, what we are doing is simply doing it with the attitude of inviting, allowing body and mind to settle. If you don't know what settling, allowing mind to settle is, at least you can start with letting body to settle. So in both cases, letting body and mind settle, some kind of resolve, right, needs to be made to say, okay, now I'm going to let body and mind settle. Now think of them as having natural places that they settle into. Doesn't matter, where that might be. Eventually, maybe we'll figure that out. But again, it's the attitude that says, Now let body and mind settle. Now I will let body and mind settle. And I let body and mind settle. Partly the way to do that is I am going to get out of the way. So that means get out of the way, including saying, hey, why are you not settling? Get out of the way. Just don't mess with it. Leave body and mind alone, and then just let body and mind settle into their own places. For now, wherever their own places are, whatever you know or don't know about what that means, just let it lightly suggest to you that they have their own places to settle into. As body and mind settle, they both settle into a quiet and clear place. If you feel a need to check and see if they are settling, then see if you can savor, if you can taste this quiet and clear place. If you find your mental labeling it as cannot, then just leave it alone. Leave it alone and go back to trusting that if you get out of the way, body will settle and mind will settle. If you have to make adjustments to how you are sitting, do it in the spirit of slight adjustments that are necessary in order for body to settle more easily, more naturally. So lightly even ask different parts of the body what is needed for it to settle into its own place. lightly consider what the mind needs, what the heart needs for it to settle into its own place. Be present, present with gentleness, present with patience, when you when you had your earphones, you were creating an echo in the room because you were hearing 1 second late, and making your sounds 1 second late. Good morning, welcome to Urban Dharma, especially if this is your first time. So anyway, feel free to change seats at any point. You're not committed to the seat that you have chosen and the way of sitting either. So feel free to hop up to the chairs, to the pews, or even there's a couch over there. As long as you can listen, I suppose it's fine. But if you are sitting on the cushion, something I like to always point out to people, because I see too often how these zafus, these cushions, trick people into thinking that they were designed for you to sit on completely, as one would sit in a chair. They are not designed for that purpose. Can you give me a prop? If you look at these cushions, this is called a zafu. It comes from the Japanese tradition. So if you're unfamiliar with this, you may think that, oh, look, there's so much surface, so I'm going to sit on the whole surface. And even like somehow, miraculously, maybe my 2 legs can be supported by this tiny little, cushion to sit on. That's not what it's designed to do. Granted, it was designed maybe for a Japanese body, which until recently tend to be smaller. It's not the case now. Still, a Japanese person would not be able to sit on this whole cushion. This zafu is designed so that your pelvic floor is somewhere here. Before it slopes down for sure. So it's almost designed to tuck under. So when it's tucked under, one knee here, and it's forming a tripod. And so it's providing support for your back so that you kind of wedge it, Then rest of the body is here. And so you want to make sure that you're not trying to sit, because if you sit all the way back here, what's going on is you're putting a lot of strain on your back. If you're younger, you will not notice this. Yet. Eventually, you become a great meditator with a very bad back, if you keep continuing. If you're older, you will notice quite quickly. But then you think, well, maybe this is something different. I'm supposed to feel it. No. Come back here so that there's more support for your back. Now, it can become slightly different when you're sitting on a chair. For this purpose, for the purpose of meditation, if you're seated on a chair, you may actually want to tuck one of these behind you. Because chairs are created to destroy your body. In the guise of giving you support. Right? Chairs are created so that you sink into it. And that's another way to ruin your back. And all of us have been ruined that way. And without becoming great meditators. So if you're seated on a chair, it's a good idea. But everybody is different. These are just points of suggestion for you to consider as you let your body settle. Right? So these are just points of consideration. It may or may not make sense to you, applicable to you. So, so if you sit again, like especially on the pews, also see the way the pews are designed, the seated part falls back. So again, it wants you to kind of let go of everything and let the chair, the pew, provide you support. Well, what that does actually is it doesn't actually provide you support. It gives bad posture. But anyway, again, listen to these, points about how to sit and all of that. Not as rules, but more points for checking in with the body to see if it is seated in an optimal position. What's optimal position? We'll look at that very soon. What's considered optimal for the work at hand, so to say. Anyway, a little bit of background. So the immediate context of this weekend's program is a form or an approach to training the mind, an approach to Buddhist method of training the mind that is called Shravasti meditation. Shravasti meditation, as the way it's done today and taught, is fairly recent in the sense that based on the 16 stages of mindfulness of breath, and these 16 stages of mindfulness of breath is found in quite a few places in the Buddhist canon. There are three main Buddhist canons, like canonical collected teachings of the Buddha. They exist today in three languages. One language is called Pali, one of the ancient Indian languages, a vernacular of sorts at one point, and then it became kind of invested with weight because some of the earliest Buddhist teachings were compiled in that particular vernacular. So back then it wasn't called Pali. It just at some point, it gained that name. Anyway, that's the canon. That's the body of canonical Buddhist texts that Buddhists in the Theravada countries, Sri Lanka, Burma, or Myanmar, Laos, Cambodia, Thailand, and they are predominantly Theravada cultures, and so their canonical language is Pali. Then classical Chinese is the other canon. And classical Chinese is the canon for Buddhists in East Asia. So China, Japan, Korea, and Vietnam. Then the third canonical language now is classical Tibetan. So used by Himalayan and Tibetan and Mongolian and Bhutanese Buddhists. Like Mongolia, Bhutan, Ladakh, they have their own languages, but the canonical language is Tibetan. So these are the three canons. So these 16 stages of mindfulness of breath is found in all three canons. But the specific discourse or teaching of the Buddha called the Anapanasati, awareness, mindfulness of the in-breath and out-breath. Anna is ana and apana. Anapana is the in-breath and out-breath sutra. In the three canons, it exists in the Pali, It exists in the Chinese. It was never translated into Tibetan. But the 16 stages exist outside of the discourse of the Anapanasati. And so it does exist then, in the Tibetan canon. But for all intents and purposes, barely utilized in the Tibetan context, these 16 stages. Until recently, in one of the lineages or orders of Tibetan Buddhism known as Drigung Kagyu, which myself and some members here are part of, the head of the order, we have two heads. Since the 17th century, they have kind of, these two reincarnate Lama lineages have been heads of the lineage. And one of them, the Kyabgon Chesang, who is actually now at the age of 80 on his birthday, the day of his birthday, he went into a 3-year retreat. He had done that early in his life, way back after he escaped from Tibet. And he did that when he was a lot younger. And now at the age of 80, he has gone into retreat for 3 years. So maybe 10, 15 years ago, he started teaching this approach to the 16 stages that he called the Shravasti meditation, named after where the Buddha taught the 16 stages on numerous occasions in this place in India known as Shravasti. Shravasti today is a kind of sleepy, quiet little village in India. But in the Buddha's own time is one of the major cities. So if you go to Shravasti today, you're like, oh, Shravasti, meditation. It's basically New York City at the time of the Buddha. So something interesting there, that the Buddha taught this in the New York City of his time. So maybe appropriate for us, right? So Shravasti meditation is His Holiness the Drigung Kyabgon's way of training, offering a training of the heart mind based on these 16 stages. So that's called the Shravasti meditation. But whenever I've done this program, I don't call it the Shravasti meditation because I'm not exactly doing this the way His Holiness does it. When His Holiness does it, of course he has done it in a 2-day thing or even 1-day thing. But really the whole program, when he does it, he prefers to do it over 10 days. In some ways, I would say model after the Vipassana method that Goenka teaches, which is also a 10-day program. And some of you may have attended some of those retreats. So His Holiness would do it over 10 days. And over 10 days, these 16 stages, he leads people through these 16 stages. And not only does it have these 16 stages, also over the 10 days, he would introduce a little bit, a little bit, a little bit. By the time 10 days, you arrive at the 10 days, there's a whole set of physical breath exercises that he draws from the Tibetan tradition of Truko, movements of the body. He draws from Chinese Qigong, and he draws from Indian yoga. So His Holiness is very open to being eclectic. He draws from these traditions, and he introduces this set of physical exercises over those 10 days, integrated with the 16 stages. So I'm too lazy to do the 10 days. And honestly too, I don't feel that I'm trained to do to lead you through the 10 days. But good news is, like in the US, there are now, I notice, 2 places that you can do this. And both wonderfully led by very seasoned and experienced teachers, 2 nuns in our lineage, and Kemo Droma, American woman, who lives up in Maine now. From time to time, she offers this. Then Ani Chudran over in Escondido, just outside of San Diego in California. So on both ends of the country, you could go, and join their programs. Later, we can give you more information how to check in with them and see when is the next time they're doing this. We have members here who have gone to Kemo Droma's program more than once, I think. So they know better. They're not here today. They're like, we've done the real thing. My job, I did have a task. I do have a task that His Holiness gave me, which is, he says, you should teach this, and you should teach this from the angle of giving people more classical Buddhist content to this approach. Help people understand where this is coming from. And so during the pandemic, I think sometime around then, he sent out a letter to all our centers, and he said, if you all want to learn the Shravasti meditation, the practical 10 days of sitting, the know-how, go to Kemo Droma. At that time, Ani Chodron wasn't teaching yet, but now she is, so very, very good that we have these 2 resources. And then he said, and then if you want to know more, kind of the depth of the Dharma that is behind these 16 stages, then, if you want, come to me. So I'm continuing that responsibility when I can. It's not the main thing that I do here at Urban Dharma, but we do this regularly. So after this, if you become interested, another place that you can kind of continue or follow up is there are several sets of Buddha's breath and Shravasti meditation in the YouTube channel called Drikung Dhamma Kirti. Again, we can give you that name later. At the back of this, Drikung Dhamma Kirti. Although there, it only gives you the website. But if you go to YouTube, we have a channel called Drikung Dhamma Kirti. You go there and you can find Buddha's breath. There's one set of 4-hour-and-a-half classes that was done over 4 Thursdays here. Every Thursday, we have a group that meets here called Open Sangha. And from time to time, I would do a cycle of 4 Thursdays. There's also another set that is on this website that is maybe 6 classes that was done during the pandemic over Zoom and available on this website as well. So you can follow up further. So that's the kind of the immediate context for this Buddha's breath Shravasti meditation. In His Holiness's way of teaching the 16 stages, there's a couple of unique characteristics that I can talk about very briefly. And the way I will talk about, of course, would be in contrast, because in contrast to how others teaching or training people with these 16 stages. So, as I said, this discourse, this sutra, exists in the Pali canon. And of the 3 streams of Buddhism, generally you can divide Buddhism today into these 3 kind of families, 3 streams, based on the 3 languages. Classical Chinese, Classical Tibetan, and Pali. Right? So of these three, it's among the Theravada community that this sutra has occupied a central place in terms of how Theravada communities would engage in meditation, relatively speaking. In the Chinese, it's there, it has been there, but not utilized. In Tibetan, it's there, even more hidden, barely utilized. Except in some cases where some doctrinal texts mapping out the structure of the whole system. Then they talk about the 16 stages, but yap, as far as I can tell. Even His Holiness would say that, mostly just yap. But they don't do anything with it. It just provides kind of a conceptual structure for other things to take place. Primarily in the Tibetan tradition. So it's very unique in the Tibetan world that His Holiness is teaching this. In fact, when he first started, some among his cohorts kind of like, and there were some even like, that's a lower practice. Tibetan Buddhist propaganda. And it's like, oh, those Theravada people, they do those things. We are more advanced. And His Holiness is like, yeah, they have no idea what they're talking about.
The lesser vehicle.
Yes, they'll say the lesser vehicle, And so it's like, no, this is not. In part, it has something to do with the founder of our lineage, Drikung Kagyu. Just as a footnote, the founder of the lineage, Drikung Kagyu lineage, Kyoba Jigten Sungan, who lived in the 12th century, he accepts, the idea of the Buddha's teachings are given in stages. But within the context of the stages, I would say, his unique kind of position in the Tibetan Buddhist world is actually, he doesn't exactly come out saying that, but I dare say that in his way of understanding how all these stages are related, he basically, his position is what was taught at the beginning was taught completely, perfectly, profoundly, but because we didn't get it, he had to continue teaching and coming up with more and more fancy things because we were not sold at the first level. So he saw all the succeeding levels as to get you to understand what he taught on day one. Yeah, so even Vajrayana, the fanciest, or now, like Dzogchen, Mahamudra, all of that was taught for the purpose of you idiots who didn't get it. When he said, here is suffering, here is cause of suffering, here is the end of suffering, and here is the end of suffering. Huh? Okay. Then he lived for another 45 years. So from that perspective, I really, His Holiness said, yes, this was taught so-called at the beginning, the 16 stages. But the 16 stages, whether it's shallow or profound, depends on the person using it. As far as it being a tool, it's a tool given by the Buddha. How profound is this tool depends on the skill of the user. Right? So when it comes to tools, I'm like terrible, right? I always say, give me a nail, give me a hammer, and then I can tell you what's going to happen. So no skills. So no matter how well designed, this hammer is going to be, the casualty is always the fingers. No skill. Right? If you have skill, the hammer doesn't need a lot of improvements. So then the other thing that is unique here is in Theravada communities who have taught Buddhist meditation based on this Anapanasati, most of them, I won't say all, again, until recently, most of them have emphasized various tetrads within the 16. So the 16 is divided into 4 sections. So most of the teachers and the traditions that came from these teachers teaching using this Anapanasati would use only parts of the 16 and not the 16. The way His Holiness uses the 16 stages is all 16, from 1 to 16 as a complete cycle. So that if you attend the 10 days, by day 10, you're going through cycles of 16. Interestingly, there are some Theravada meditation teachers and who are also scholars. Here we don't insult people by calling them scholars, just for context. In the Buddhist tradition, we use them in the way to honor them. So some of the scholar monks in the Theravada tradition have started to emphasize that there is a reason why the Buddha gave the 16. The reason being that going through all 16 stages has its own internal logic. So they are calling for the Theravada community to revisit this issue and consider that there is an internal logic to going through the 16 stages. So to me, that's kind of interesting. That His Holiness, based on his own insights, really, engaging this material himself, he understood this as the complete approach is to take all 16 stages. So that's another unique characteristic. So just again in contrast, I don't know much. I hearsay because I've not done it. For example, in the Vipassana method of Goenka, he chiefly emphasizes more or less the second tetrad, the sensation or feelings. Physical sensations that arise and paying deep attention to the sensations, and then through awareness of the sensations, breaking through to some kind of insight. And so chiefly emphasizing that. And then some other traditions chiefly emphasize the breathing part without necessarily wedding it together with the 4 frames of references, which is how the 16 is divided. There are 4 frames of reference, often translated as foundations of mindfulness. But let's call it frames of reference. 4 windows for us to look into. So awareness of breath, awareness of the experience of the incoming of breath and the outgoing of breath is the method, so to say. And what is the method used for? To look into these 4 windows, these 4 frames of references. So that's how, and by looking at these 4 looking into these 4 windows, we gain insight or wisdom into what is this, where does suffering come from, where does happiness come from, how do we put an end to suffering, how do we experience genuine happiness. So that's kind of the way that Shravasti is, in a way, different Furthermore, as I said, just as His Holiness has drawn from the Truko tradition of Tibetan Buddhism, these physical exercises, breathing exercises, and drawn from Qigong in the Chinese tradition, and drawn from, the yoga tradition for the physical set of exercises. The way he trains with the 16 and teaches the 16 is also drawn from various sources. First and foremost, from within his own tradition, the Mahamudra, or the Great Seal tradition of Tibetan Buddhism, as well as the Great Completion, Dzogchen tradition, and general Tibetan kind of meditation practices. He draws from that source. The text he used is the Pali text of the 16, the Anapanasati Sutta. And then he also draws from his own interest in the Zen Chan tradition. He has translated some Chan Zen texts from classical Chinese into Tibetan, sort of part of his ongoing interest. So Shravasti meditation as a method also brings in from the various traditions. So this is kind of the flavor of Shravasti, the 16 stages of Shravasti meditation, that makes it a little different from what most people might be familiar with when they learn about the 16 stages. So 16 stages, as I said, is divided into 4 tetrads. So if you look at page 5 of the handout, so the first one is body or kaya. On page 5 are the first 4. Page 6 is Vedana. Page 7 is Chitta. And then page 8 is Dhamma. Dhamma or Dharma, here I've chosen phenomena, but it has a double meaning there. Phenomena as in, like just phenomena. But when we understand phenomena, when we understand what is going on, the deeper of what we understand is reality, which is what Dharma is too. So it has this double meaning. But you definitely begin with the small d, Dhamma. So these are the 4 frames of references, looking into these 4 windows and looking deeply into these 4 windows. When you look at the Anapanasati Sutta, so the narrative for that sutta, is as follows. It says that one day, after the morning practice of going on alms round, which was a practice that the Buddha established for his monks and nuns, is you go out into the community for alms. And there was, of course, an existing tradition already of providing food and sustenance to religious figures. There were, at that time, basically 2 types of religious figures in India. There were the Brahmins, which is you're born into it, and you are priests and educators. You are priests and educators, Brahmins. So those are kind of born into it, kind of religious figures, you could say. And so even there's the notion of giving to the Brahmins. I would say the Brahmins, the closest equivalent, not that it's so well known either, but to me I think the closest equivalence to Brahmins is in the ultra-Orthodox Jewish communities. A tremendous emphasis that all males should study and basically live on, bordering on poverty. They raise a family, part of your duty is to bring more boys into this picture so that they can continue studying the law, studying God's will, and teaching, right? And then the unseemly occupation of making money is left to those with lower potential. So then they endow all these study grants for the study of the Talmud. Likewise, in ancient India, Brahmins sometimes. Of course, these days Brahmins really wealthy, over time. But in its original, I think it wasn't necessarily like that. They were the class dedicated to studying and the transmission of knowledge, including ritual knowledge. So that's one kind of religious people. The other kind of religious people during the Buddha's time are the dropouts. And those are hippies with a goal, which is to seek, complete liberation. And so the Buddha's disciples, the Buddha himself, fell into this second type. The second type. And so they would go on alms round and receive food. So the bigger framing of this sutta is, so they went on alms round, and then come back, eat their meal of the day. The Buddha went to rest. And then the disciples were having discussion about how to train the mind, what to do with the mind. Then after the Buddha rested in the afternoon, it's said that he came and he could see that they were engaged in discussion. And he approached them and they saw that he was there. And so then they told him what they have been doing, and he says, okay, now let me teach you this. Let me tell you this. And then the discourse. So there's a lot more going on in the discourse itself, but at the core of it, he gave the 16 stages. But before he gave the 16 stages, he gave also what I would call the ngondro, the preliminaries to the 16 stages. So the ngondro, as we would say in Tibetan, that which comes before, is here on page 4. He says, having gone to the wilderness, to the shade of a tree, or to an empty building. And so here he is talking about find a place that is most conducive to doing this practice. And where is this conducive place? To the wilderness. I remember they were in the outskirts of New York City. So Jetavana is on the kind of outside, right on the border. But even that, he says, go to the wilderness, go out into the forest, or to the shade of a tree, so somewhat protected. But there's a slight kind of connotation here, I believe, to the shade of a tree, as well as to an empty building. Both these places in the Buddhist context are places that people, for the most part, are a little bit hesitant to go to. Because trees are not just trees. Trees are also dwelling places of spirits, especially big old trees are homes to spirits. And if you don't know what to do, if you are not careful, you could piss off the spirits. There's numerous stories in the Buddhist canon about monks mindlessly pissing off tree spirits. There's one wonderful story of a group of monks, completely sincere, completely earnest, they decided, okay, this where we are living, in this like outskirts next to a village, it's getting too noisy, right? The urban sprawl. So they're like, okay, let's go somewhere else. So they took off as a group, and they found a forest grove, and they're like, okay, maybe we should settle here. Let's see if we like it. So apparently, like when they got there, so then they sat under the trees, right? They're not building tree houses, so they camped out, underneath the trees. So apparently there was also a community of tree spirits, or at least spirits who have taken residence in these old trees. And so they saw these monks coming, and they'll go, well, yeah, it's a little impolite to be living above these holy people. So they're like, maybe they're passing through. We'll get down from the trees for the duration that they are here. And so they came down and went maybe to the bushes or whatever, 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, 4 days. These monks still there. They're like, gosh, are they going away or not? Day 4, day 5, day 6, day 7. And the monks have kind of decided, we like it here. And these spirits are like, wait a minute, that's not the deal. They were supposed to move on. And so apparently the spirits started causing hauntings. Then the monks went to complain to the Buddha, like, we found this great place, but then things started getting weird, And then the Buddha said, well, actually, the great place that you found, right? And they were homes to this, these community of spirits. And without any consideration, you have parked yourself there, and you have dislocated them, and so now they are really annoyed. So then the Buddha gave some resolution to this situation. I forgot what the resolution was. Basically, it's basically along the lines of, now you all need to, learn to live with each other. And you monks need to be, humble and not assume like, because you like the place, and therefore, things should go your way. There's someone else that's already living there. So there is a little connotation here that under the shade of a tree is generally a place where others won't go. And as well as empty buildings are generally places people won't go. So look for a place where you will be least harassed, distracted, unless there are spirits there. Then the Buddha has other advice of what to do. In fact, especially in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, there's lots of kind of other preliminaries that you do when you go to a place and you want to go practice there. There are simple and very complex things you do to basically establish an understanding with the pre-existing residents of that place. Yeah. So even back to the founder of the lineage, Kyoba Jigten Simgen, he says, when you go to a place, because he famously would send disciples who come to him, after a period of time training with him, he sends them off. He says, you go into the mountains, you go into caves and practice. No need to come back. You've already got everything you need from me, now go. And so because of that, he would teach them how to approach places that you may intend to spend a period of time. He says, first of all, when you get there, curb your enthusiasm. It's very interesting. He says, if you feel like, yes, this is great, he's like, please control yourself, because others are watching. And they may not be happy that you are so happy. He said that, very interesting. He also said, and then if you go to a place that you're going to practice and you feel like, I don't know, this doesn't feel right. It's not that ideal. He says, that's a good sign. Yeah, he says, that's a good sign. He says, then, chances of you staying will be greater. Then also he said, the other thing is, he says, when you get there, then what you need to do is you need to make an offering to the beings that live there, and do it with loving kindness. And he says, as you are extending this loving kindness, you need to tell them when you are checking out. Yeah, you need to set a date of departure. And then he says, now, if in time you need to extend, then there's other things you need to do. But you need to let them know that you're not here to take over, that you are staying for a while, and stick to the terms of that agreement, unless you can modify the contract. All very sensible. And I think this has lessons that we can learn, whether spirits or not, about how we occupy space, how we enter into any space, to have an understanding and an attitude of like, come with humility. So, having gone to the wilderness, to the shade of a tree, or to an empty building, the next instruction is to sit down, folding legs crosswise, holding body upright. So I believe that in the Buddha's time, by and large, people did not have chairs. There were chair-like structures that were only reserved for chieftains, kings, and very holy people. Otherwise, everybody else sat on the ground. And in terms of sitting on the ground, there are really various ways one could sit on the ground, right? With legs all stretched out, with legs folded to the side, like a lot of Thai, Southeast Asian, Burmese would sit. And so there are many ways of sitting, whereby the Buddha identified sitting legs crossed as the most ideal. Why? Because of all the ways of sitting on the ground, it's the most stable. So rather than with your legs bent to the side, or, like that, or legs stretched out, or kneeling, the most stable and comfortable is to sit with your legs crossed. Then even more stable is to sit what we call the full lotus, and what the sources call the Vajra position. Vajra means immovable. And that's the right foot resting on the left thigh, and left foot resting on the right thigh. Some bodies are just not built that way. So, what to say? Full lotus, not always possible. But sitting cross-legged, generally possible. So, without, getting too fixated on, it needs to be sitting cross-legged. If you're seated on chairs, know that the key point here is to sit in a stable way, in a way that you are not going to be needing to move and to fidget too much. So sit in a stable way. Next, holding body upright. So the body should be upright, not hunched over, chest open. So from these two, that you can elaborate into 5 points, into 7 points. So especially in the Tibetan tradition, the 7 points. In the 7 points, it's basically elaborating on these two. The 7 points also basically contribute to these two, which is stable and upright. So in the 7 points, you have legs crossed, hands equal both sides, and held together in the meditation posture, with the thumbs touching, right palm above left, although in Zen tradition sometimes it's left above right, but basically thumbs touching, held in front, or also in the 7 points sometimes it says you can put your both palms on your 2 knees and let them rest naturally. In Buddhist tradition, we don't have hands open like that. Neither do we do this. It's just not within this tradition. There's reasons for these, but we don't have a tradition of holding like this. Yeah? Just FYI. Or like that, but palms down. So that's in the 7, that's the second, right? Working up, legs crossed, 2. Then 3, shoulders should be open. 4, the spine should be upright. 4 and 5, chin tucked in. 6, the eyes gaze down, like along towards the nose, but then gaze downwards. And then the 7th is the tongue placed on the palate of your mouth, with lips lightly touching. Those are the 7 points. And this is said to be the optimal way of placing the body. So whether you check in with the 7 points or simply these 2 points, take these 2 points as the way in which the body settles. The body can become quiet and the body can become clear. And so the seated with legs crossed, think of it as like a cue and a way to let body quiet down. Then it corresponds with less of a need to move, to fidget, to scratch. Now, if you feel a need to scratch, if you feel a need to move, bring intention into it so that it's not autopilot. Because habitually we would do all sorts of things, It's not that, Buddhism is an anti-fidgeting cult, or an anti-scratching cult, right? It's not that. But it's, all of these movements is related to the mind moving. And it's also not the case that Buddhism is a mind not moving cult. Then you're just training to be a rock. That's not enlightenment, turning into a clump of clay. It's just that when the mind moves, due to unskillful habits of the mind, habits of the heart, then seemingly rather innocent movements become the building blocks for more obviously unskillful experiences, unskillful projections, unskillful actions of body, speech, and mind. And so in a way, meditation is dealing with the most basic building blocks of experience. And that's why it needs to be subtle. Buddha did not teach meditation for relaxation, for stress relief, for pain management, although you could meditate for all those reasons. That's what I mean by there are good reasons to meditate. But Buddha taught Buddhist meditation to get to the very roots of suffering. And when it comes to those roots, it's not the coarse things. It's actually very subtle things. Subtle things like twitching the body. Even that. Because that twitch is related to very subtle movements of the mind. What is moving the mind at that subtle level makes all the difference. If it is coming from what the Buddha called the three poisons, then everything down that sequence is poisoned. But if the movement comes from somewhere else, meaning free from the three poisons, then what unfolds from there is beneficial. It's what we call Buddha activities. But not knowing where that movement is coming from, and that not knowing itself already tells us where that movement is coming from. And so, sitting down, folding legs crosswise, is how to settle the body. How to settle body is in the end a question of how to settle the mind. Holding the body upright is related to clarity. So to quiet the mind, to let the mind find, to let the body and mind find a place of quiet and a place of clarity. Clarity of mind. So this uprightness of the body is directly related to the clarity of the mind. And these we say, and so this is where the kind of Mahamudra side comes in to this understanding. Like these are innate qualities of mind. The mind that is unmoving, which is related to emptiness, and the mind that knows, which is related to clarity, the clear-like nature, and the emptiness nature of mind. So then it comes directly to as something down to something that seems so simple as, oh, that's just Buddha telling you how you should sit. But how the body is, the mind is. How the body mind is, the external world is. So these are all related. In the Hevajra Tantra, I think it says, how it is in the inside will be how it is on the outside. So working with these correspondences are already kind of hidden in these seemingly, insignificant recommendations, but it's not. It's Buddha taught. Sometimes we may hear that Buddha taught the different teachings based on what sentient beings like or don't like. Actually, that's a slightly wrong view, or very wrong view. No, Buddha is not here, to pander to what we like and don't like. Buddha taught what is true. Then, Buddha need to be effective in communicating what is true. So there is nothing arbitrary about what he gave. they are adapted to be skillful, yes. But at the root is not something kind of willy-nilly. Yeah? So sit down, folding legs crosswise, holding body upright. Then the third of this preliminary is establishing mindfulness to the fore. So this expression to the fore has given rise to, for example, in the traditions that use this sutra as a basis for meditation, they say that the fore is talking about a specific part of your face, right here. So they they say that according to this understanding, then the focal point for these 16 stages is right here, where breath enters and exits, right in this spot in front of your nostrils. We don't read this as talking about a literal location. We read this as bring mindfulness to the fore, meaning mindfulness is already a property of mind that we have, an ability that we naturally have. It's a very big word these days, mindfulness, Are you mindful? No, it just means the ability to recall, the ability to bring to mind something that you already previously know. That's the kind of blunt, basic definition of smriti or sati. The ability to bring to mind what you already have registered before. Not something new, therefore. So it's that ability to bring to mind, to bring to the fore. So you bring this awareness to the front, to the fore. Then, always mindful, breathe in, mindful, breathe out. So all of this belongs to the preliminary. So this fourth step, always mindful, breathe in, mindful, breathe out, you are already starting being mindful of breath. So here, leave it natural. Breathing is a natural, involuntary process. Involuntary until it stops. Then that's it, right? And so always mindful, always knowing. Now breathing in. Now breathing out. However you label that. But the emphasis here is not so much on label, but on being present to the experience of breath arising and ceasing. And so here when we talk about mindfulness of breath, we are really not really talking about the movement of oxygen. The pulling in of oxygen and the expelling of carbon dioxide, right, is just the kind of outer layer of what is going on. Right? There is something more subtle going on when breath arises and ceases. And from that perspective, breath is arising and ceasing from within. What is pushing out and what is pulling in? Right? It's the more subtle aspect of the experience of breath. So rather than seeing it as so much about pulling something in and expelling something out, on a more subtle level is you could call it like the pulsing of life itself, right? There is something else, right, that is making this possible. The pulling in of air and the expelling of air. Experiencing that. Inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale. That becomes a constant going back to point in this practice. An ability to, at will, without too much difficulty at least. Right? Maybe at first it's not at will, but at first, for a while, without too much hassle, without too much forcing, without too much coercing, when you say, pay attention to this experience, you can. So that's the kind of baseline that you want to train in before you begin the 4 tetrads. Maybe I can connect this with, you have seen maybe, right? This Tibetan device called the prayer wheel that is turning. Some hold it in their hands and they're turning it, right? It superficially it seems like a mindless activity, right? Because your hand is turning, and often people are also chit-chatting, selling stuff, maybe even having an argument. It's been a while since I've been to Hasa in the Bakur. When was the last time you were in the Bakur? Oh, really? Yeah. Oh, only Amdo come. Yeah, Bakur, this is like in Lhasa, the most holy city, kind of the Benares of Tibet. At the center in this temple, in this area, lots of people circumambulating all day all day, and everyone have their prayer wheels, and then all the shopkeepers, sitting there doing business, they all have their prayer wheels, and some of them are like triple deck prayer wheels, not just one, like 1, 2, 3, and some even have 2, and they have these belts that they wear, and usually they're elderly. And these belts are designed to rest the heavy prayer wheel to support, Oh, yeah. This was, at least in 2014, this was still, I don't know, things change, people change. But at all times, they are turning prayer wheels. And even when they are like having a fight and haggling and, bargaining and trying to make a buck more than what the tourist wants to give, they are still turning their prayer wheel, And all couples walking together with their little, Lhasa Apso following in the back, turning, No, the Lhasa Apso is not turning a prayer wheel. I mean, and it may seem kind of mindless, but actually it's not. Why? Because the mind is always, some part of it is anchored on that. So in between, you do whatever you do, habitually do, skillful or unskillful, but there's a part of your mind that is anchored on this. In the same way, these 16 stages, as you go into the 4 tetrads, you always have the preliminary, the foundation, maybe better word translation for Ngondro here is the foundation of experiencing breath, rising and ceasing. As you turn your attention to these 4 tetrads. So for a while, it should be learning the ability to experience breath rising and ceasing. Begin with first, the simple fact of oxygen being pulled in, carbon dioxide leaving, or less scientific, breath coming in, breath going out. But from there, you want to savor, taste what's underlying that experience, which is life itself. When you're dead, that which is pulling in and pushing out is no longer functioning. It's no longer there. And so elsewhere it's said that breath is a property of the body. And that is in the context of the Buddha saying, when you look at what's here, what can you account for? What can be accounted for when you say, I? Basically two things, body and mind. And then when we say body and mind, what are we talking about? We're not talking about two things. We're not talking about two objects, like two discrete things. We're talking about two sets of processes. One set is physical processes are going on. Second set is mental emotional processes are going on. Right? So these are the two sets of activities that are going on. So Buddha says, now look at these two sets of properties. And then zoom in, and zoom in, and zoom in, and zoom in, and get to the finer and finer and finer details of these two sets of processes, which is how we get to Dhamma, the fourth tetrad. The most, you could say, impersonal level of looking at what's here. The most personal. So these four tetrads are moving in a particular direction. From the most obvious aspect of how we identify, how we fabricate the experience of I. How we experience, how we fabricate the experience of I, and then from I, me, from me, mine, and then from there collectively, I, then you, then yours. So in most personal terms, it begins with body. Then more subtle than body are sensations, the next category. Then more subtle is what is called mind. But actually it's in the plural. It's not a thing. So all those different moments of mind that arise from moment to moment to moment to moment is the third tetrad. And the fourth tetrad gets even more subtle. The mere phenomena of each of these moments. So we are basically, the four frames of references is four increasingly more powerful microscopes. Not telescopes, but microscopes. You're looking more subtle, more subtle, more subtle, more subtle, until down to the basic building blocks of experience. So that's kind of the general movement throughout the 16 stages of what's going on. Okay, questions, comments? Okay, where do we start with questions? Start anywhere. Yes, reposition yourself. Sometimes stand up. Lying down is a little dangerous. You could start snoring. Then awkwardly, someone needs to poke you. Yes. Sorry, the four what?
The fourth one in the tetras. Near something of each moment. You missed that word, phenomena. Say it again.
The mere what?
Phenomena of each moment. That was the fourth one.
The four tetrads are here in the booklet. Yeah? If you're looking for what the 4 tetrads are, it's here in the booklet. Page 5 is the first tetrad, body. Page 6, feelings. Page 7, minds. Page 8, phenomena. You see them? They all have a heading for each page. Yeah.
We missed that one word.
Yeah, those are the 4 frames of reference. Yes, Bill.
Sometimes when I'm sitting
Uh-huh.
and I'm quieting my mind, I almost feel like there's another, thanks. I almost feel like there's another level below that. I have no control of that chaos going on.
It's the mind. What we kind of like generalize and call the mind, right? First of all, it's not a thing.
Right.
But if we want to kind of use an analogy of a thing, then rather than an apple, it's more like an onion. You peel, you peel, you peel, you peel. There is another layer, another layer. Yeah? Then along the way, you cry a bit. But if you know how to breathe, you cry less. Some pith instructions. If you know how to breathe, you cry less when peeling the onion. Also, stick the onion in the fridge before you start peeling it. In a way, this is what is going on here. It's sort of sticking the onion in the fridge before you start peeling. Because the first 2 tetrads is about calming both body and mind. In other places I said, in a way we have learned this process upside down. Because we get exposed to things like Buddha says all becomings, right? All states of being is characterized by unsatisfactoriness, dukkha. They are not self. And they are unreliable, impermanent, right? Yeah, of course, anyone who practices Buddhism, probably quite early on, unless you're born in a Buddhist family, then you never learn about these things. Yeah, but if you adopt it somewhere along the way, you probably learn this first, right? But if you look at the program here, it says, no, don't tell them that yet. That's just going to scare them away. You only tell them that at Tetrad 3 and 4. Yeah? We don't need to be fundamentalists about it. In any case, the cat is already out of the bag. The toothpaste is out. There's no way to get it back into the tube. But there is something to be said here, that a deeper way of understanding these characteristics of suffering, impermanence, and not self, they should not be just kind of intellectually accepted. That the real liberating power of seeing this should only happen when you have learned how to put that onion in the fridge, so that when you need to peel it, you're crying less. So that unsatisfactoriness can be seen just as it is, rather than, but why does it have to be? That is if we learn about it intellectually. Then we kind of want to fight these 3 things. But here, it says, don't turn your attention to impermanence and dukkha until you have learned how to cool down all the flames. When the heart is inflamed, you cannot do much to it yet. Right? It's like when you have an infection, you go to the doctor, you go to the dentist. All they can do is give you antibiotics and say, come back. then we fix the problem when that inflammation has died down. So actually the first 8 steps is to let the inflammation die down because it's a little too raw right now. So the first 8 steps is actually skillful ways of feeling good. Contrary to what general impressions we may have, which is that, the Buddha was not a very fun guy to be around. That anything that is pleasurable or fun, he says, bad. Contrary to that opinion, the first 8, the Buddha is teaching us how to experience a skillful way of feeling good. First body, then mind. And when body and mind are both in a good place, and now the heart and the body is not inflamed, then the surgical procedure can be effective. Then the peeling of the onions. After it's sufficiently chilled, not frozen, then also you can't peel. Good balance. Also, participating on Zoom, you can also ask. I think they have given you the power to unmute yourself, I hope. In case you have any questions or comments. Yeah,
This is
yes.
the basis of the teachings of the 4 foundations of mindfulness.
Yeah, so the normal translation is 4 foundations of mindfulness. I think I prefer to translate as the 4 frames of reference. Yeah, the Buddha gave 4 windows into what is this. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Between different teachers and lineages, there's some differences in view about at what point is it one's kind of shamatha or calm abiding practice mature enough to move to, in this system, it's like the first versus the
For
second.
the Zoom purposes, sorry. Yes.
I'm just curious about what's your perspective or this lineage's perspective on at what point is it appropriate to kind of move towards insight practices or from the...
Right. Yeah, so there is some, across traditions and approaches to Buddhist meditation, there is the question of, where is it calm abiding, where is it insight? Because generally they say Buddhist practices, meditation practices fall into these 2. This question animates certain Buddhists more than others. Yes. In Theravada communities, it's a hot topic. And Theravada meditation as a mass movement, so what that means is beyond monastic and beyond monastic elites, actually. And majority of monastics for most of Buddhist history never meditated the way we talk about meditation. Among monastic elites, and then it went from monastic elites to all, and then even lay people got very involved. So there's a whole genealogy of modern meditation movements. There's some research that's been done. They all arose around the 19th century, which is an interesting time because the Rimé movement also around that time. As far as you could tell, there's no... Rimé is just a not very useful term. Some other more interesting things are going on. Now I'm talking to Lowell. We geek out on some topics like this. I think Rimé is just hiding some more interesting things going on, which is the rhetoric of experience, all of that. I think it's happening at the same time that it's happening in Southeast Asia, across the Buddhist world without necessarily people talking or exchanging information. There's a sudden kind of like interest in internalized experiences, and therefore new kind of vigor, interest in like doing the practices. So in the Theravada world, they were very interested in the line between the two. Then in the most known movement that went beyond the boundaries of the Theravada world is the Mahasi tradition, where they very specifically would call it, we do Vipassana, we don't do Shamatha. Even to the point of like, Shamatha and its results are dangerous. So then the pendulum went that direction. Now the pendulum is swinging the other direction. There is not enough books being published quick enough to make people excited about the jhana states that come from shamatha. Third move, Bhikkhu Analayo and that group, which is the scholar meditators I'm talking about, and they are saying, and including Tanisaru Bhikkhu, they are saying, shamatha and vipassana are not two sets of practices. They are two qualities that arise from practice. This is more in tune, I would say, with the way His Holiness would teach this. That there are not two sets of practices, and you don't really go, first I practice this set, then I practice this set, but they are simultaneous. And this is also more, you see this attitude within the Theravada world in Thailand. Yeah, Burma is a very technique-oriented Buddhist culture. So they are endlessly concerned about technique. In the northeastern corner of Thailand, where the forest tradition is strongest, they are much more concerned about the heart, attitude. That everything is about changing the attitude, changing the heart. And then no matter what technique you pick up, it will take care of itself. And this, I would say, would be more in this tradition. Yeah. Although His Holiness does, when we talk about the 16 stages, he is interested in what some of the old commentaries are saying. Where do you cross from shamatha to vipassana? But as a practical practice, on the practical experiential level, he doesn't emphasize. Now it's this, now it's that. So in the Thai forest tradition, Ajahn Chah would give the analogy of using analogy that the villages that he teach, they get immediately. He says, to clear the forest path, you need a machete that is both heavy and sharp. The weight of the machete is the quality of shamatha. The sharpness of the blade is the quality of insight. He says, if your machete doesn't have weight and only has sharpness, it will blunt easily. But if it has weight and it lacks sharpness, then you have to swing very hard. But if you develop both, then elsewhere he says, it's like this stick, and then he picks up a stick on the ground. He says, when you lift up, a stick, it says both ends come up at the same time. It says that's shamatha and vipassana for you. Yeah.
Question.
Yes.
What has touched me very much in the words you've used is the heart and mind being inflamed.
Mm-hmm.
And without being redundant or not interfering with the direction of these practices, I find that this is actually what is at the doorway of my even beginning to meditate. And wondering if you have any initial guidance.
Sure, sure. I will say more because the next two tetrads is basically cooling down this inflammation. Everything is on fire right now. Right now means, even 2,500 years ago. One of the discourses the Buddha gave is everything is on fire. He said, 2,500 years ago, he says, everything is on fire. The five aggregates, the aggregate of form is on fire. The aggregate of sensation is on fire. The aggregate of perception is on fire. The aggregate of mental formation is on fire. And the aggregate of consciousness is on fire. Everything is burning, burning, burning. Then he talked about cooling down, cooling down, cooling down. How to cool down the heart. So that's the calming, if you want to frame it in those terms. That's the calming, the calm abiding part. Then from there, from a cool place, then the clarity arises. But it's not the case that, there's a standard line of where you cross from cooling into clarity. Cooling and clarity, they are two sides of basically what is innate. So first, how to cool down the heart. So let's take a break, stretch a bit, and then we will continue. What time is it now? Let's see. Oh, it's 11. Perfect. So we'll take a 15-minute stretch break. Those of you who are local here, there is a cafe over there. And then chai is not open until 11:30. Or is it 11? Something like that. You could check. If you want chai, that direction. If you want coffee, that corner. These wisdom.
When I'm hearing something addressed for newer people, where did that even begin? And why is it something that people are advised to do?
So the question of where did this come from? This instruction to count. Yeah, I wonder. It's not in the Anapanasati Sutta itself. It's not part of the 16 stages, for sure. I think it's just something to give the busy mind to have to help it, to anchor a little bit. But I don't necessarily emphasize. Again, in this method, it's not an emphasis. It can bring, some kind of sharpness, as well as, there's, quite serious debates and disagreements as to whether you should focus here, whether you should focus here, I think that's just too much of people staking down their territory in the abstract sense of the word, not that there's even any actual real estate being fought over. People become fixated, Then in some I've even heard, like communities who learn it from one teacher that says count, Then teacher passed away, and then suddenly one side say, he says to count the out-breath, not the in-breath. And then the group like splitting into two, over, And I'm like, who cares? You're sitting there quietly, who knows whether you're counting in or counting out, you know? Like, if you can't get along and sit in the same room, there is no more hope for this world. Yeah, right. No, the pause in between, count that. Let's bring another reason that you could fight over, right? Yeah, count the pause in between the in and the out as a possible third. But with the counting I found, so I included that, right? I said, be careful so that you don't let your counting drive your breath, but that it should be, you're counting the breath, you're not, like pacing the breath with your count. Yeah, there I think it's worth seeing that there's a difference. When you are letting your counting direct the breath, then it becomes kind of like a marching order. Then it becomes a very, in my opinion, kind of rigid. It's not really mindfulness of breath anymore. It's something else is going on. Now, having said that, in the tradition, goes back quite far. In the tradition of training in the Lojong, this is in the Tibetan tradition, the Lojong in 7 points. The preliminary to the second point, so the first point is train in the preliminaries, and the commentary there is basically a 2-part training in what's normally called the 4 thoughts that turn the mind, turning the mind from distraction, turning the mind from, getting pulled and dragged around. So the 4 contemplations, the 4 thoughts that turn the mind is one set of preliminaries. And then there's another set of preliminaries, and this is found in some of the earliest commentaries, going back to maybe 12th century, 13th century. There in the second preliminaries, they say, then the second preliminary is a preliminary of training in focusing, centering the mind. And there they actually say count to 21. So where that came from, I don't know. But so counting is not just like in the last 50 years. In the 12th, 13th century commentaries for that text, that tradition, they say count up to 21. And there is used as a measure of like when to move on to the next step of that training, which is training in ultimate bodhicitta meditations. So it says you make that transition to that stage of training when you can hold your attention up to 21 breaths. So there is a purpose there. That's like, when do you move on? Yeah. Up to 21. There is a funny story about how absurd, religious types can get when fighting over small details. Some story from a different tradition is from a Christian tradition. Some guy sees, obviously someone is getting ready to jump off a bridge. So he comes up to intervene, and try to talk this other guy out of jumping off the bridge. As they're talking, this guy intervening, he thought, I'll try, Are you religious? Asking the guy that was going to jump. I was like, yeah. And he's like, Jewish? Christian? Christian. Oh, good. I'm Christian too. And I'm religious. Oh, okay. So some understanding established there. A Christian. Oh, okay. Catholic? Protestant? Protestant. Oh, yeah, me too. Protestant. Oh, good. Protestant. So, what kind? Baptist. Yeah, me too, you know. Oh, wow, yes. The 1872 conference Baptist or the, 1746, whatever, right? It's like 1872. Oh, yes, yes, yeah. Same, Wow, wow. Must be God's will, See, you should not give up, You should live. God loves you, la, 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 la. And then it's like, so, northern, southern? Northern, oh yeah, good, good, conservative or liberal? Conservative, yeah, see, God intends for this, What are the odds, And then the final question, he gave the wrong answer. He's like, die, you heretic. So sometimes, we get so carried away. Fighting over doctrinal purity and, accuracy of technique and, eesh. The other mystery, now that you asked this question about where does this counting comes from, the other mystery is the closing the eyes mystery. I have not actually come across in the early, at least in the early text, or even in many of the later instructions about closing your eyes. But somehow, most of us have gotten in the habit of like, oh, meditate. Then you close your eyes, I don't know. Maybe this was at a time where people were struggling with being distracted by sight more than struggling with staying awake. My problem is more, at least at one point, with staying awake, so it's never been very attractive to me to close the eyes. Then even I found like, when I close my eyes, like more thoughts turn up. Which makes sense, like when you're thinking really hard, you tend to go, and then it just stirs up, right? More thoughts. So here in the instructions, like in the Anapanasati, it doesn't say close your eyes. Then more so in the Mahamudra tradition, we also talk about how, and this is the part where it says, leave all your sense doors open. Don't shut them down. There are other types of training in the Tibetan tradition where you kind of want to shut down as much as possible, sight, sound, smell, taste, touch, and then leading to even sensory deprivation tanks and, dark retreats for other reasons, there are such traditions, which is simply to say that there are so many ways. We're not saying good, bad, but test it out and see what is working for you now, with the understanding that you will change. Your needs will change. But do try, not closing your eyes, or more importantly, try the approach of not thinking that you need to control sense objects from turning up. Right? Because that one, I think, it's worth taking more seriously, and not just, oh, it's a nice suggestion, but it informs a whole attitude towards what is it that you're trying to do when you learn meditation, and not go in the direction of like shutting out the world, which it can move in that direction of like shutting out the world. Right? It's not about that, and then it may even feed our kind of neurosis of thinking, if only I can control what's going on out there, then, peace and happiness will finally come. It's related to trying to control the world of the senses from intruding into our space. They don't intrude onto our space. It's us busy going after them. If you want to assign blame, don't blame, sight, sound, smell, taste, touch. Sight is just being sight. Sound is just being sound. They don't come to you. You go after them. And so the resolve of, I don't need to go. And so the analogy given is, think of yourself as being in a house with, 6 windows. Right? Rather than pulling down the blinders, to the windows, leave the windows all open. Then instead of doing what we now do, which is every time some sound, some sight, some smell turns out at any of the windows, you're like a monkey, hopping from window to window. Then, right, the world tells you you can be a better monkey at jumping from window to window to window to window to window to window, let's take a class in becoming more agile. Then you can jump better from window to window to window to window. Then the other one is to say, seal the windows. That is another way of driving the monkey crazy. The monkey becomes destructive. But instead, let the monkey grow into something else, which is, let the monkey kind of evolve into being uninterested and unconcerned with what turns up outside those windows. Sit in the middle of this house and let the world be the world. Let sound be sound, let sight be sight, let taste be taste, touch be touch. Just let it all take place, and you hold your place. Right? So you steady the heart, you steady the mind. So Buddha says, the path consists of 3 elements of training. First, training in disciplined conduct, Shila. So the importance of adopting a set of training for disciplined conduct, normally translated as morality or moral ethics, but it really goes beyond moral ethics. Of course, all the moral ethical values are there, but Sutrim is, in Tibetan, Sutrim covers more than just moral ethical matters. It's about a discipline, a way of being present in the world, a way of being physically present in the world, a certain deportment, a certain way of moving through space. In fact, all of that falls under this Shila, under Sutrim. So that's one aspect of the training. If we think of these 3 aspects in a linear manner, then they say you start with Sutrim, then you progress to the second element, which is called Samadhi. So Shila, Samadhi, and Prajna, right? But Samadhi, normally translated as meditative concentration or concentration, again, that translation, concentration, become increasingly, I don't like that translation, because often there is this idea that when we talk about concentration and meditation, we're talking about narrowing. Your attention becomes more and more narrow until it becomes like a laser, kind of attention. I don't believe that is what the training is. Samadhi, sama, means like even. So it's a way of holding the heart steady. So it's you could say stability that arises from the mind, the heart being settled. So then the heart holds steady. The heart doesn't move so easily. And you are not being dragged around by feelings that arise, thoughts that arise, words that you hear, news that you read. You hold your heart steady. Steady in a way that is very natural, actually, because it's an innate quality of the mind to stay at this state of holding steady. But because we have habituated being dragged around, so then even when nothing is dragging us around, we will think up something. Just to affirm the existence of what is being dragged around. It becomes habitual in a neurotic way. So samadhi, or mental concentration, and then by extension, when we talk about shamatha and calm abiding, it's really abiding, like staying steady. So closely related to samadhi is samahita, nyamsha in Tibetan. There, even more a sense of like staying the course, staying steady. So that's the second set of trainings, which is steadying the mind, steadying the heart. Then when the heart or mind becomes steady, then understanding arises, which is what we translate as normally translated as wisdom. Prajna, one etymology may be false, but I call it creative etymology. Is the pra is an intensifier. Nya is to know, knowledge related to that. So a heightened knowledge, a heightened understanding, meaning an understanding that see beyond the surface of things. So a deeper understanding of what is, rather than simply what appears. Right now, we are just acting and reacting to what appears. And then, not understanding the mechanics of what appears, we think that what appears is what's really out there. But what appears is not what's really out there. What appears is what? What appears. And what is it that appears? Or how does appearances appear? Specific to each of us. Appearances appear to you. And not recognizing that there is a difference between what appears and what is at the core of confusion or delusion. And so, this wisdom, this appearance, is about, right, developing clear seeing. So these 16 stages cover these three trainings. Or these 16 stages cannot be practiced without appreciating that another way of stating the 16 stages is the three trainings in Shila, Samadhi, and Prajna. So the normal way of thinking about these three trainings is linear. Ability to practice Shila, well, leads to easier Samadhi. Samadhi leads to seeing clearly. But actually, rather than the way in which you practice the three is more like building a tripod. Let the three legs grow up increasingly together. Let them support each other. It's not so linear. So this is the Sila, Shila, Samadhi, and Prajna. So Shila, if we want to take a more linear, then training in Shila in this context, right, begins with having a discipline of paying attention, of paying attention to breath. And breath as the most basic property of being alive. Even before food, even before water, breath. The single aspect of being alive. And how we have basically ignored, breath. So I recommend, reading this book called Breath. Is that what it's called? I always forget what exactly it is called.
James Nectar?
Huh?
Was it by James Nectar?
Yeah. The new art or the new science or something is. That's a really good book. It has great insights about breath. So we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we are going to look at the first tetrad on the body. And so maybe by now you already clue into this. We're not going to finish 16 stages by tomorrow. But thankfully, right, there's no exam at the end. I'm not, at the very least, if there's an exam, I'm not going to ask you questions about the third and the fourth tetrad. I think if we can do the first two, which is in a way the most needed, the first 8, which is how to cool down, all these fires that are burning. And principally the inflammation of body and mind. How to cool that down. So the first 4 steps is cooling down. So you see it says, step 4, calming bodily fabrication. Kaya samskara. Calming bodily fabrication. So when bodily fabrication is going on, which is right now, at every moment, bodily fabrication is going on, it produces heat. And this is bad heat. There's good heat and there's bad heat. This is bad heat. In TCM, traditional Chinese medicine, they call it false heat. True heat is digestive heat. That's good heat. So when we come back, we'll talk about the body and also what is this thing called body? So we cannot assume that what the Buddha called body is also what we now understand as body. Body is a loaded word. The body. Right? Like good, and then next you have good body image, bad body image, right? So body is not a thing. Buddha had a particular way of helping us understand what's this here. So then based on that understanding, he identifies bodily fabrication as one of the things that goes on, that if it's going on in an unskillful way, it gives rise to bodily stress. That's the inflammation of the body. Then the body is on fire. These first 4 steps is to cool that down. At a certain point, just to plant a seed, maybe in a few months, I would do another program based on another text, another sutta that the Buddha taught called awareness or mindfulness of body. Kaya Gata Sati. There the Buddha gives further instructions on these 4 steps. It begins with these 4 steps, then it transitions to body in terms of body still, body moving, then body standing, and it goes from there into sensations related to body, thoughts related to body, and phenomena of the body. It's a I've done this before. It's a very nice set of body being the object of training the mind. So anyway, when we come back from this short lunch break, make it a short lunch break so that you don't have too much carbs in the system, which will make the job harder for both you and me after this break. So let's see, right now it's 12:25 here. So let's say 2. So that gives us an hour and a half